Just imagine if a member of your family was taken hostage by Islamic State militants. You'd probably, almost certainly, want the government to do everything it could to have them released unharmed, even if that meant paying a ransom to the hostage takers. Most nations are signatories to international agreements that ban the paying of such ransoms, but it turns out that doesn't mean that massive amounts of money aren't being paid to militants to save the lives of hostages.
So did the family of Nicolas Henna feel like the American families that it was compelled to try to raise millions of euros or to enter into negotiations for his release?
No, because France's government does not allow a private person to pay ransom or to negotiate, even to discuss with hostage takers. So my family, I'm extremely happy to be French because I'm very happy of the way the French government handles this kind of situations.
Here's the central paradox. The French government, and for that matter, every other European government I know of, insists that it doesn't pay ransoms. And yet, here you are.
Let's not be naive. I know that there have been a compensation given to the group for my release. I just don't know what it was.
But somebody surely paid.
Paid or gave something else, I don't know.
Pretty diabolical situation. Pay money to save a life and in doing so potentially provide money that could be used to take more lives or provide an incentive for more hostages to be taken who could lose their lives. It is certainly an ethical dilemma. At the heart of this special report, you can see it on tonight's Foreign Correspondent program, presented by our panellist tonight, Jonathan Holmes. This is an intriguing story, Jonathan. In the case of that French hostage, the government says it didn't pay a ransom, but money, it seems, was certainly paid.
Yes, I mean, France and every other European country says they don't pay. Nobody believes them. It simply is not credible. There have been hostages released by Al-Qaeda branches in North Africa, by Al-Qaeda branches in Yemen, leaving aside Islamic State, over the last decade and a half. And actually the amount of ransoms that have been paid have been going up steadily from a couple of 100,000 to anything up to 10 million euros per head now. Now, that money is being paid by proxies. So, for example, you give an aid donation to the government of Mali, and the government of Mali then passes the money on to the kidnappers, and miraculously 2 weeks later, the hostages are released. Or the French nuclear firm Arriva will pay a ransom. It's a state-owned company. I mean, guess where that money's coming from? In the end, the people who I've talked to, who have talked in turn to negotiators and so on, say it is the taxpayer that's paying these ransoms.
So in reality, French taxpayers are funding Islamic State?
Yeah, well, certainly Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb or Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, both of which are very heavily dependent on ransoms. The Islamic State has got other sources of revenue and actually has not been charging as much, if you like, as Al-Qaeda. I think it's around the 2 to 3 million mark for an IS hostage, or it was in 1914 when there were any. There's none anymore because nobody is stupid enough to go to Syria, at least no Westerners, journalists or aid workers. And so they're kind of running short on hostages. There
would have to be huge potential for this to backfire, that it puts a target on the back of every French man and woman in the world if hostage takers know that there's a huge price on their head.
That is certainly the claim that the British and American governments make, that their citizens are safer because it is known that they don't pay ransoms. The problem is that's almost impossible to demonstrate, and I've certainly seen FBI people, for example, former FBI people, and that's the agency that deals with this in the United States. There was one on American television when I was there saying, we have no actual evidence that that is the case. It's almost impossible to know. But look, I think it does make the French a bit more vulnerable, but there's huge public expectation in Europe that their governments will pay this money and free hostages. There is not the same public expectation in the Anglo-Saxon countries, and it comes back down to that old sort of cultural difference about what the job of the government is. There's still a gulf in that area, as in so many others, between Europe and the Anglo-Saxon countries.
Didn't the French gentleman imply, or the story imply, that there was private people paying ransoms for Americans and
yeah.
British hostages. So in actual fact, if that happens, then it doesn't make any protection at all. They're just getting it from a different place.
Well,
they don't care where they get the money from.
Well, they don't, but the amounts are now prohibitive for private, for families. And that's part of the result of governments paying ransoms, is that they've gone up to levels where if you're an ordinary private family in Britain or United States, as Kayla Muller's parents said on television, that's the girl who was killed allegedly in an air raid but had been held hostage for a year and a half. And they were in touch with the kidnappers. But they said, how do you raise $6.2 million? It's just an ordinary family. And the government won't help them.
Chris Berg, you got a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jonathan, does refusing to pay ransom, does that create an incentive just to kill hostages, or just to, if you capture someone, just to immediately kill them? Did you find any evidence around that?
I don't think you can say quite that, Chris. I think this kind of public killing only happened in the past with Al Qaeda in Iraq, which was extremely brutal and used to regularly kill hostages. The other Al Qaeda branches actually found it much too lucrative a business to risk killing hostages unless in extreme circumstances. But what I think Islamic State has discovered is there is tremendous propaganda value, sick though it may seem, in these beheadings, these public beheadings, that has increased their appeal to fundamentalists around the world. And so I think they don't really care. They don't need the money as much. I don't think they really care. Give us the money or we'll bump you off publicly. It's all the same to us.
All right. And just quickly, Jonathan, in terms of Australia's policy here, it is not to pay terrorists. Do you think, were it to happen again, it happened in Iraq with Douglas Wood some years ago, but were it to happen again, would they stand firm on that, or would there be one of these back channels being exploited?
In the case of Nigel Brennan, who was a freelance journalist who was captured in Somalia not very long ago, held for quite a long time, very brutal circumstances, with a Canadian girl who was brutally treated. They were eventually released in exchange for ransoms paid, as I understand it, by their family and by individuals like Dick Smith, who came to the party. The government did not pay, does not pay, follows the UK and US policy.